Two, just making sure you can see me and hear me okay. We are back for another Monday Guitar Motivation live. So yeah, just go ahead and say hello, tell me where you're at there, and we'll go ahead and get started and we'll chat some guitar today. So today we're going to be talking about strumming. One of my favorite topics to talk about when people are learning how to play and they're kind of struggling with different things. So let's see here. Ryan is here. How you doing? Ryan from Seattle is here. Keith Logan is here. Ronald is here. Steve and Casey from London are here. Very cool. Karen from Nepal. Somber from Belgium. We are all over the place. This is great. Bob is here. Kyan is here. Mike Rudolph is here. Lewis is here. Very cool. Glow in the Dark, which I don't know who that is, but hello. Jake and Al. Mark is here. Vincent Roberts is here. Meta Tarot from Vienna, Austria. Very cool. Juan is here from Buenos Aires. Very cool. Ricky is here. How you doing, Ricky? Bill is here. Hi, everybody. Bobby is here, and we've already got a lot of people here. So thank you, everybody, for being here. This is great. So what we're going to do today is we're continuing our conversation from last Monday. If you were with me last Monday, what we talked about was how important it is to start building up your chords and practicing bouncing and all that kind of stuff to develop your chords. Because for me, as a guitar teacher, the most important thing that I can teach anybody is how to strum and chord at the same time. And if you can learn to do those things, you can learn to play songs, you can learn to have fun, you can learn to jam with other people, you can play in a band or play in church or wherever it is you want to do your thing. And then from there, you can keep escalating to whatever level you want to get to. But at the very, very least, we need to be able to make those chords, make those chord changes, and strum at the same time. And when we do those, it's so important that when we play, it sounds real. It sounds authentic when we strum. Let's see here. Jason Carter is here from Germany. That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here, buddy. Sean is here. Sergey is here. Sharing Soccer is here from Mexico. So just saying hi to a few people. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. Thanks for hanging out with me. This is so awesome. So in today's Monday Guitar Motivation, what I want to talk to you about is understanding how to strum. And I'm going to break this down as quickly as I can because I don't want to waste a bunch of your time. But the most important thing is understanding when you hear a song or you hear a beat, a drummer starts playing or something, the first thing that you do is you start feeling the beat with your leg or your hand or your head or whatever. And I'm not going to go all deep into theory stuff, but it's important to understand that when you strum the guitar, there's only two ways you can strum. You can strum down and you can strum up, okay? You really can't strum sideways, okay? So that's all you can do is strum down and up. So if we can organize the way we think about that and then organize the way that we actually execute that, we might be able to make our strumming sound a little bit more authentic, right? Now, again, you might be great at strumming, and that's great. And if you are, please help somebody else who's struggling with it, because these are the things that, unfortunately, if you don't learn how to strum and you don't learn how to chord, you don't learn how to put those two things together, which is what next week's lesson is about, oftentimes people quit playing guitar, and that's the worst thing for me, is I don't want people to quit playing guitar. I want you to succeed, and I want you to have fun doing it. I want you to stay motivated. That doesn't mean that it can't be frustrating sometimes, but I don't want you to quit. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, okay, is this whole strumming thing. So if we understand that when we're listening to a song or we're listening to a drummer or something like that, and we find where we're going to put this, whatever, okay? I'm not worried about, tempo and that sort of thing, talking about tempo at this point. Just understand that the first thing you do is you figure out where this is, okay? Now, whenever I get guitar students, or used to when I was teaching private lessons, the first thing I would always teach people is how to do a technique called scratching. Before chords or anything like that, I would just teach them how to do what I'm talking to you about, which is listening to some sort of song or whatever it might be, and then trying to figure out how to scratch to it. Now, scratching is done by simply touching all 6 strings with your hand. So what I do is I take all 4 of my fingers, I just lay them across the strings. Okay, I'm not just using one, because I might get those sorts of sounds. So if I just lay all 4 fingers across there, and I get that sound, okay? just a scratching sound. And what I can do is I can start learning then, as I'm listening to the song, where the downbeat is, where the quarter note, if you will. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. As I'm listening to that song, that's where I'm feeling the beat. Now, again, it might be faster, whatever, but that's the first thing, is just learning how to figure out where that beat is. Okay? Now, in order to evenly strum downward on the beat every single time, what I have to understand is my hand has to come back up. Okay? So as I'm strumming these downs, at any time I can learn to play the ups in between. So let's just break this down a little bit. If you know anything about theory, we have what's called quarter notes and eighth notes. Now, eighth notes are just twice as fast as quarter notes. So a quarter note would be like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, which means an eighth note would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Okay? So for us as guitar players, that means we're going down, 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 or down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Okay? So as we start playing and we put these downs in, we also need to realize that the up is available at any time by simply playing them in between. Now, for a lot of players, I'm actually teaching a class right now, and I was talking to a student about this. They struggle with this, and I've got a little ways to go in our conversation here before we get to this, but they struggle with this because they're trying to think about chords at the same time while they're strumming, and sometimes they get confused. And the most important thing to understand is when you're doing this strumming technique, think of your arm as being like a metronome. It just moves back and forth, okay? It's impartial to the downs or the ups. All it wants to do is just move back and forth. That's all it wants to do. And if you miss the ups, they're still there, and you still make the movement, and you even can still think about them. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. You're just not playing them, okay? So it's not like hammering a nail where all the power goes into the hit, and then you lift it back up. It's a constant motion back and forth of both of these things, okay? So just a couple quick stories here, just so you kind of understand where I'm coming from. When I first started teaching guitar, I was working at a local guitar store, and I was teaching a guitar class. My boss was teaching this class, and he didn't want to do it anymore. He's like, hey, would you like to teach this class? First experience I had with teaching. So I had this guitar class, I made my own book, all this stuff, and I started teaching them how to play some essential chords and strumming and things like that. And what I used were some strumming patterns. So I would teach them like down, 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 up, down, or something like that, right? So I would teach them a couple of strumming patterns and then some chords, and we would learn how to play some songs. Okay? Then there was a lot of people that wanted to continue on, so what we did was we had a second class. 80% of the class went on to this second class, and I was teaching them how to do things, whatever. Well, somewhere along there, whether it was the second class or the third class or whatever, and I'm still figuring this whole teaching thing out because it's my first experience doing this, what I started realizing was that I was in a certain degree, I was teaching them to be robots, and I didn't even realize it until a little bit later on in these guitar classes, because what I was doing was I was teaching them how to play these strumming patterns, and what was happening is they were playing the same strumming patterns for everything, because they don't know what they don't know, right? All they know is what I'm teaching them. So ever since then, what I've tried to do as much as possible is avoid strumming patterns. Now, in saying that, that doesn't mean that strumming patterns are bad. They're not inherently bad. It's just if you rely on strumming patterns, because again, we're humans. We love things that equate to an answer. 2 + 2 = 4. It makes sense to us. But strumming the guitar is more of a creative element than it is a mathematical element if we allow it to be so. Because if you think about it, what I always tell people is when you're learning how to play guitar, chording and strumming, they're not really friends with each other. Okay, these two hands are actually being dictated by two different parts of your brain. One half of your brain is controlling your chords, which really are black and white. You're either making the chord correctly or you're not, right? G is G. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't different ways you can make G. Of course there is. But you can't just decide you want to make G like this. Because if you do, it's no longer G, it's something else, okay? So chords can be replicated and practiced over and over and over to develop them because we need them to be accurate. We need them to be clean. We need all the notes to be accurate. We need the strings that we're pressing on to sound and the strings that we're not pressing on to make noise, all that sort of thing for them to sound the way they're supposed to. Strumming, on the other hand, is coming from the other half of the brain, in my opinion, and what it's trying to do is make these chords sound happy or sad or angry or beautiful or, esoteric or whatever it might be when you're playing. So when you strum something, if you go for every single song, it's going to get old after a while, right? Now, of course, we have tempo and all those sorts of things, but let's think about the two things that really make a strum sound organic or authentic. The one thing is variety. And you may have seen me talk about this before in other videos where I talk about it. I call it the ocean strum. Because if you've ever sat and just watched the ocean before, the ocean is unpredictable. It's not like all the waves are exactly the same size and they move exactly the same way every single time. It's unpredictable. And that's kind of what makes it fun to watch and fun to listen to. So if I take a chord and I start playing in different places, now again, please understand, that doesn't mean that sometimes we don't want a strumming pattern. Sometimes we do. But there are many times if you were to meet a guitar player that you like and they played on whatever song and you say, hey, how did you strum that? They're not going to go, well, I did down, 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 up, down, up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down. They're not going to say that. They're probably going to go, I don't know, I just strummed to it. Okay? So if I take this G chord, for instance, and I just start strumming everything. Now, if I understand that that right there is the palette for every song that I'm going to play in our conversation, okay? So all I have is this infinite number of downs and ups that happens for 3 minutes or 2 minutes or 5 minutes or however long our song is, right? So what I have to do then is start trying to miss some things to give it some space, because if I do this the whole time, it's going to get boring. Just like if I did this the whole time, it might get boring. It might not, but it might. So what I start doing is I start doing this thing where what I have students do is simply move away from the strings and then move back into the strings. And you try and do this as brainlessly as possible, even though that sounds like a terrible term. What I mean by that is you're not trying to dictate the strum down, down. You're not trying to do that. What you're trying to do is shut that part of your brain off, and you're simply going to try and take all of these strums, I'm strumming everything, and I'm simply going to move away from the strings. Let me change my camera angle here for you. There we go. So watch this. If I go like this. Now I'm going to start moving away. Watch this. And I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just physically moving my hand away. And watch what happens. Now, it's going to sound really random at this point because it is, and that's okay. So if I take that random idea, okay, and I just scratch to it, and going back to what I was talking about before, just scratching. So you're playing everything, and then you just start moving away from the strings. And the most important part about that isn't the pattern that you are or are not making. The most important part is that the arm never stops moving. It never speeds up, it never slows down. It just simply moves away and then comes back into the strings, and then moves away and comes back into the strings. And what you might even realize when you're doing this, or if you're teaching this to somebody, is that when they move away or when you move away and you come back in, okay, you might come back in on a down, but you might come back in on an up. And it's important to allow that to happen, because you don't always want to have to come back on a down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes you want to allow yourself to come back in on an up. And again, you're trying to just do this by feel. You're not trying to do this by 2 + 2 = 4, and it's a strumming pattern. So watch what I mean. Switch camera angles here again. So if I do this, I'm going to move away. See how I'm coming in on the up strum there? Here I'm going to come in on the down. Now, that's the first step of this, is just learning how to move in and out. So as you're listening to a song, that song might be telling you, hey, this is the strumming pattern that you should be using. And that's okay. That's okay. And if you're going to use that strumming pattern, that's great. What I'm saying is, if you develop a strumming pattern for a song and you accidentally or intentionally deviate from that strum to whatever degree you choose, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay? It's not like you're wrong. Like, that's the whole thing I want you to understand, is if you're strumming to a song and the song's doing, like I Used to Love Her, if you know that song by Guns N' Roses, very typical strumming pattern, called, what I call an eagle strum, which is this down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up. But as I'm playing, if I was playing this song and I was singing this song, or whatever the case may be, and I deviate from that strum, that doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it human and organic, right? Now, so you're going to be dealing with songs that either are based off an idea of a strumming pattern, or they're just playing, okay? And again, please understand, neither one is wrong. It's just thinking about that. So if I go back to this organic strumming thing, okay? One more thing to tell you about this. So I move in, I move out. The other thing I want you to think about is the idea of dynamics, which is hitting the strings harder or softer. And again, you don't have to pre-plan it. You might just decide, now if I put those to chords and I start doing this, notice how it sounds more authentic and more like rolling is a good way to think about it. It's just smooth and it's rolling versus trying to do this. Because here's the problems now. Now let's get into the problem that happens. Sometimes when we're listening to a song, anytime we listen to a song, as a matter of fact, what we have to decide, and I don't want to be confusing here, but we have to decide whether or not we want to put our downs, let's say the song is going 1, 2, 3, 4. So I put my downs here. And then my eighth notes would be here. Okay? Perfect. I'm done. But for some people, instead of feeling the quarter note to the eighth note, which is slow to medium, okay, what they'd rather do is take all of these eighth notes, this down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and place them all on downs. And what that does is it opens up the ability to strum 16th notes. Okay? So understand, if I'm listening to a song, so here, let me go back to this. Okay, so there's that. Now let's say I wanted to do this instead. What's happening here is I've shifted from quarter to eighth, or slow to medium, and instead of thinking of it like that, I'm thinking medium to fast. So it's eighth to 16th. Now, sometimes the benefit, if you can feel that and if you can physically play it, is that if I put my downs here and my ups here, back to my downs, I can strum every other down and still get that quarter note feel. But I can keep bumping up as needed to get to these other ones. Because the problem is if you start off playing, and I'm not saying it's better, I'm just trying to explain to you how this works. So if I put my quarter notes here, and I want to, it's like shifting from first to fourth gear in a car. Like, it's going to sputter and it's going to shake, and because you're trying to go from one speed back and forth like that, where if your brain's already thinking, See, I can shift between all of those. Now, that's a personal choice, and it depends on the tempo of the song. It depends on the groove. But I need you to understand that, because sometimes when I watch people play, and this is what I was talking about earlier, they'll do something like this, and they'll try and shift back and forth between those. And again, if it works for you, that's wonderful. But for most people, it winds up feeling very jagged. So that's something that you have to watch out for. Now, that brings us to one last conversation, and then I'll let you go here, which is when you're strumming, there's a jagged kind of strum that is what I've always called the Cro-Magnon strum, because I've always thought about it like a Cro-Magnon person smacking somebody over the head with a club. When you play, if you're doing... like an AC/DC kind of song, where it's not rolling. It's not that feel. It's a completely, it's a different kind of feel. So what's happening is we're kind of jumping in there very ruggedly and playing and then stopping. Now, that doesn't make it bad. It's actually a wonderful thing. I've always thought of that more as like the aggressiveness of the not complete, but the subtle inaccuracies of that kind of strumming versus the rolling strum is what gives it its wonderful sound. So when you do something like this, now I'm playing Jailbreak, okay? So that's what that is. But in my mind, I'm hearing, that's my beat. Now, not that I need all that, but that is still there. Even though it feels rugged and it sounds rugged, it still has a system to it. I'm just approaching it differently, but it still levels out rhythmically in a subdivision. So maybe later on in the song, you would strum more or whatever it might be. So if that makes sense, it's still technically coming from the same place. I'm just being careful of what I'm hitting and trying to give it more of that aggressive sound. Because what we know is, you look at like whoever it might be, Metallica, that kind of thing. It's the down strums, even though it could be strummed rolling with downs and ups, it's the persistent down strums that gives it kind of like a locomotive feel, like a train, this power moving forward. Instead of going, when you go, and you start speeding that up, it's that ruggedness that makes it sound the way it does. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't still exist in this thing I'm trying to explain to you in terms of downs and ups. It's just you're choosing to play the downs or whatever it might be to give it a different kind of sound. So if that makes sense, what I want you to start doing over the course of the next week is scratching as much as you can to songs. And I really should have started off talking about this, but I honestly believe there's more people than not out there that don't develop enough of their ability to groove and strum and feel rhythm because we're so excited about trying to get to chords or trying to get to scales or trying to get to whatever that we never really develop this real, again, some of us, not everybody, but we don't develop this sense of rhythm, which is so important to music. So if you can just scratch to things and develop that idea, it's going to help you in the long run. So what we want to talk about next Monday is putting the chords, which is the bouncing and all that was on last week's Monday Guitar Motivation, if you remember. And if you haven't, you can go back and watch that and then put that. The secondary thing we do is we practice scratching. So I always tell students every single day that you practice, which you should be practicing on the days that you eat, which is every day, you practice scratching. You practice rhythm. It doesn't matter how long you've been playing guitar. You develop your ability to feel groove and to execute that groove on the instrument. And then you practice all of your other things, chords, scales, whatever it might be, okay? But you develop these things independently. Because the trick, of course, to guitar playing and improvising and all these other things are playing on stage and singing and playing and moving at the same time, which seems kind of silly, but learning how to do that well requires automation. If we're having to think about this and we're having to think about this, and we're having to think about this, and we're having to think about standing on stage or whatever it might be, and we're thinking about all these things at the same time, chances are it's not going to work very well. Some of this, if not all of this, needs to become automated. That's how organic exists. That's how when people listen to you and they go, wow, that sounds great, that's where that's coming from. It's not from the concentration of all these independent pieces. We do that in our practice. So when people hear us, we've already done that. We're just offering them music now. We're not offering them different practice elements, even though we really are for us, right? But for them, what they're experiencing is music. So if you think about that a little bit, that's what I want you to focus on for next time, and then we'll keep going with putting these two things together. Okay? So if that makes sense, thank you everybody so much. Do me a favor, if you haven't already checked out guitarzoom.com, go check it out. I've got guitar courses, we've got a membership available over there, all those sorts of things, and I talk about all this kind of stuff. So stay positive, keep practicing, have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next Monday, okay?